The great crystal dome of Nexus Prime stretched high above the assembled representatives. Light from 3 different suns painted rainbow patterns across the floor, where beings from across the galaxy sat in their designated areas. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked like walking rocks, but they all shared one thing. They were here to make decisions that would affect billions of lives. Ambassador Quan of the Velari Empire stood up from his seat. His purple skin gleamed under the artificial lights, and his 4 arms moved as he spoke. The other representatives turned to look at him. Quan was known for asking difficult questions, and today would be no different. Honored Council, Quan began, his voice carrying clearly through the dome. I wish to discuss Rule 0, the oldest law we follow, the one that says we cannot harm the humans of Terra. A low murmur went through the assembly. Some representatives shifted in their seats. Others looked uncomfortable. Rule 0 was not something they talked about often. It simply existed, like gravity or the need for air. Elder Yoon, the ancient keeper of records, sat in the center of the dome. Her gray skin was wrinkled with age, and her eyes had seen more years than most civilizations had existed. She watched Quan with growing worry. The humans are weak, Quan continued. They have no real technology. They cannot travel faster than light. They live on one small world in a corner of the galaxy that most of us have forgotten about. Why do we protect them? What makes them so special? Admiral Rowe of the Hegemony Fleet nodded his massive head. His species looked like walking bears, but with 6 legs and metal implants covering their bodies. The ambassador speaks truth, Rowe said in his deep voice. My scouts have watched the humans for decades. They fight among themselves. They pollute their own world. They have barely reached their nearest moon. Why should we fear such creatures? More voices joined in agreement. The representatives began talking among themselves. The dome filled with the sound of dozens of different languages as species discussed what they had all been thinking for generations. Elder Yoon slowly stood up. Her walking stick tapped against the crystal floor as she moved to the speaking area. The sound echoed through the dome, and gradually the voices quieted. You speak of things you do not understand, Yoon said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the dome. The old ones who made Rule 0 are gone. Do you know why they are gone? Quan crossed his forearms. Because they were weak. Like the humans. The strong survive, the weak fade away. This is the way of the universe. Yoon shook her head slowly. No, young Quan. The old ones were not weak. They were the strongest beings the galaxy has ever known. They could move stars with their minds. They could create life from nothing. They could destroy entire solar systems with a thought. And they made Rule 0 for a very good reason. What reason? Admiral Rowe demanded. If they were so powerful, why did they disappear? Because, Yoon said, her voice growing quieter, they learned that some rules should never be broken, even by the strong, especially by the strong. Meanwhile, far from the crystal dome of Nexus Prime, Captain J sat in his command chair aboard the deep space monitoring station Terra Watch. The station floated in the dark space between stars, its sensors reaching out across vast distances to watch for threats to human space. J was young for a captain, with short black hair and tired eyes. He had been watching the empty darkness for 3 years, and nothing interesting had ever happened. Until today. Captain, called out Lieutenant Bach from the sensor station. I'm picking up something strange. Hyperspace signatures moving toward our sector. Jay leaned forward in his chair. How many ships? That's the problem, sir. The signatures are too big to be ships, unless someone built vessels the size of small moons. Show me, Jay said. The main screen lit up with a star map. Red dots appeared at the edge of the display, moving slowly but steadily toward human space. There were dozens of them, and they were huge. When will they reach our outer colonies? Jay asked. At current speed? Maybe 6 months, sir. Jay stared at the screen. In all his years of service, Earth had never faced a real threat from space. Humans barely had the technology to travel between their own planets. They certainly couldn't fight something this big. Send a message to Earth Command, Jay ordered. Priority 1. Tell them we have incoming unknowns. Lots of them. On Luna Base, Dr. Nari worked late in her laboratory. She was studying quantum mechanics, trying to understand the strange forces that held the universe together. Her equipment was the most advanced humans had ever built, but it was still primitive compared to what other species used. Tonight, something was different. Her instruments were detecting quantum fluctuations unlike anything she had ever seen. The patterns seemed almost alive, pulsing in rhythm with something she couldn't identify. That's impossible, she whispered to herself, checking the readings again. The fluctuations were responding to something. But what? She ran a diagnostic. On her equipment. Everything was working perfectly. The readings were real. Somewhere in space, quantum fields were dancing to a tune only they could hear. Nari decided to run one more test. She placed her hand on the quantum scanner, thinking maybe human contact would affect the readings. The moment her skin touched the metal, the fluctuations went wild. The patterns on her screen exploded into complex formations that looked almost like writing, like someone was trying to send a message through the quantum foam itself. And somehow her touch had awakened. Back on Nexus Prime, the debate continued. More representatives spoke out against Rule 0. They talked about human weakness, about wasted resources, about old superstitions that held back progress. Elder Yoon listened to them all with growing sadness. She had hoped this day would never come. The old ones had warned that it might, but she had hoped the younger species would be wiser. I call for a vote, Ambassador Kwan declared. All in favor of removing Rule 0 from our laws? Hands, claws, tentacles, and other appendages rose throughout the dome. The vote wasn't even close. Rule 0 was dead. The humans are no longer under our protection, Kwan announced. Their system is now open territory. May the strongest claim it. Elder Yoon gathered her records and walked slowly toward the exit. As she reached the door, she turned back to look at the celebrating representatives. You have no idea what you have done, she said quietly. But you will learn. The galaxy will learn. As she spoke, deep in space, ancient warning beacons that had been silent for thousands of years began to pulse with urgent light. The message they carried was simple but terrifying. The protection was ending and the sleeping guardians would soon wake. The Velari War Council was already meeting before the vote was even finished. They had been planning this moment for decades, waiting for the day when Rule 0 would finally fall. War Commander Taman stood before a holographic display showing the human star system. His purple skin was darker than most Velari, marked with the scars of a dozen battles. His eyes gleamed with anticipation. The humans have 3 major colonies beyond their homeworld, he told his officers. We hit them hard and fast. No survivors. By the time anyone can respond, it will be too late. What about their military? Asked one of his subordinates. Taman laughed. What military? They have some primitive chemical rockets and basic energy weapons. We could destroy their entire fleet with a single cruiser. The war plans were simple and brutal. 3 strike forces would attack simultaneously. The humans would never know what hit them. As the Velari prepared for war, the ancient beacons pulsed faster. Soon, their light would reach Earth itself, and then the galaxy would remember why Rule 0 had existed in the first place. But for now, in the darkness between stars, humanity slept on, unaware that their long protection was ending, and that soon they would have to face their true nature. The first shots of the war came without warning. War Commander Taman's fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Kepler 442b, a quiet human mining colony at the edge of explored space. The planet was home to 300 colonists, including families, who had traveled across the galaxy to build new lives among the stars. Do-hyun was working in the main mining facility when the alarms started screaming. He looked up from his equipment to see his supervisor running toward the emergency stations. Through the facility's windows, he could see strange ships in the sky, their hulls gleaming purple in the planet's orange sunlight. Everyone to the shelters, the supervisor shouted. This is not a drill. Do-hyun ran toward the residential area where his wife Mirai and daughter Gina lived. The colony had emergency bunkers, but they were designed for mining accidents, not alien attacks. As he ran, the sky above him erupted in light. The Velari bombardment was precise and devastating. Energy beams struck the colony's power grid, its communication array, and its small spaceport. Within minutes, the human settlement was cut off from the outside universe. Do-Yun reached his family's housing unit just as the second wave of attacks began. This time, the Velari targeted the residential areas directly. The building where his family lived disappeared in a burst of purple fire. "Mirai, Gina!" Do-Yun screamed, but there was no answer. Nothing was left but burning metal and broken dreams. The attack lasted only 30 minutes. When it was over, the Kepler 442b colony was gone. 300 humans had died, and the galaxy's oldest law lay broken in the ashes. The news reached Earth 12 hours later. Captain J received the emergency transmission aboard Terra Watch and immediately forwarded it to Earth Command. Within an hour, every human in the solar system knew that they were no longer safe. But something else happened when the news arrived. In cities across Earth, people began to change. Isol was working in the Seoul National Library when the broadcast came through. She was a quiet woman who spent her days cataloging ancient books and helping students with research. She had never been interested in politics or war, but when she heard about the attack, something inside her mind opened like a door that had been locked for years. She stood up from her desk and walked to the library's basement. Her feet seemed to know the way, even though she had never been down there before. Deep beneath the building, behind walls that looked like they had been sealed for centuries, she found a room filled with strange machines. Her hands moved over the controls without conscious thought. Screens lit up, showing star maps and coordinates that she somehow understood. When she spoke, her voice carried knowledge that she had never learned. Weapons Cache Alpha 7 is located beneath Busan Harbor. Depth 40 meters. She said into a communication device she had never seen before. Activation code is 774 Omega. Defense protocols are now active. Similar scenes played out across the planet. Hajun, a simple farmer in rural Korea, found himself building impossible machines in his barn. His hands shaped metal and circuits into devices that should not have existed, guided by blueprints that appeared in his mind like half-remembered dreams. On Mars, 16-year-old Minho was attending classes at the New Seoul Educational Complex when the emergency alerts came through. As panic spread through the school, something changed in the young man's body. His muscles felt stronger, his senses sharper. When Velari scout ships appeared in Mars's sky 3 days later, Minho was ready. The aliens landed near the school, thinking they would find easy targets. Instead, they found Minho waiting for them. He moved faster than human bodies were supposed to move, dodging their energy weapons and striking back with bare hands that somehow hurt beings in powered armor. The Velari soldiers reported the impossible encounter to their commanders, but no one believed them. Humans were weak. Everyone knew that. Dr. Nari worked frantically in her laboratory on Luna Base as the quantum fluctuations grew stronger. Her instruments detected massive energy patterns emerging from deep within Earth itself. Ancient machinery was waking up, machinery that predated human civilization by thousands of years. "This doesn't make sense," she told her assistant over the communication link. "The quantum signatures suggest technology far beyond our current understanding. But the source points are all over Earth, buried under major cities." She pulled up historical records, looking for any clue about what might be hidden beneath humanity's oldest settlements. What she found made her hands shake. Archaeological surveys had always found strange anomalies under places like Seoul, Beijing, London, and Cairo. Geologists had reported unusual metal deposits that didn't match known elements, but no one had ever investigated deeply because the formations seemed natural. Now Nari realized the truth. The anomalies weren't natural at all. They were artificial structures waiting for the right moment to activate. "Computer, show me global quantum activity over the past week," she commanded. The display showed Earth surrounded by a growing web of energy. Every time news of human deaths reached the planet, the activity increased. It was as if the planet itself was responding to threats against its children. Captain J watched his sensor displays with growing amazement. Human colonies throughout the solar system were reporting impossible events. On Titan, colonists had somehow repelled a Velari attack using weapons that shouldn't exist. On Europa, miners were moving through space without environmental suits as if they no longer needed air. "Sir," Lieutenant Bach called out from his station, "I'm getting reports from Earth Command. They're saying people are changing." "Changing? How?" Jay asked. "Enhanced physical abilities. Sudden technical knowledge. Some people are claiming they can sense things happening on other planets." Jay stared at the reports flowing across his screen. If the information was accurate, humans were becoming something more than human, but that was impossible, wasn't it? On the distant archive world, Elder Yoon worked desperately to find the complete records of the old ones. She had fled Nexus Prime when the vote ended Rule 0, knowing that what came next would be terrible, but she needed to understand exactly how terrible. The archives held data spanning millions of years. Most species had legends about the old ones, but few had true records. The documents Yoon found painted a picture that filled her with dread. The old ones hadn't been just another advanced species. They had been cosmic engineers, beings capable of reshaping reality itself. They had seeded the galaxy with life, created the laws of physics that other species took for granted, and ruled with power that made gods seem weak. But power had corrupted them. They had become cold and distant, seeing other beings as tools rather than lives worthy of respect. The galaxy had suffered under their rule until finally, the old ones had made a choice that shocked the universe. They had given up their power voluntarily. They had locked away their cosmic abilities and chosen to live as mortals. But they had built safeguards into their transformation, protections for their descendants who would carry their genetic legacy. Rule 0 hadn't been created to protect weak humans. It had been created to prevent anyone from accidentally waking up the sleeping. God's War Commander Taman stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing reports from his scattered forces. The attack on Kepler 442b had gone perfectly, but subsequent operations were encountering unexpected resistance. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked his tactical officer. 17, sir. But that's not the strange part. What is the strange part? The humans aren't using ships, sir. They're fighting us directly in space without protection. Taman's purple skin darkened with anger. That's impossible. No biological being can survive in hard vacuum. Sir, we have video recordings. The main screen showed footage from a failed attack on a human asteroid mining operation. Taman watched in disbelief as human miners floated through space, moving between asteroids without environmental suits. When his ships attacked, the humans simply disappeared, reappearing behind the Velari vessels to tear them apart with their bare hands. "This has to be some kind of trick," Taman muttered. "Enhanced genetic therapy, hidden technology, something." But deep in his warrior's heart, he was beginning to feel something he had never experienced before. Fear. Back on Earth, the changes accelerated. Isol found herself coordinating defense efforts across multiple continents, somehow communicating directly with other humans who had awakened to their hidden nature. Hajun's impossible machines were being activated in cities around the world, creating a defensive network that spanned the planet. Do-hyun, driven by grief and rage over his family's death, felt the changes more powerfully than most. Standing in the ruins of the Kepler 442b colony, he reached out with senses he didn't know he possessed and touched the quantum threads that connected all matter in the universe. For the first time in thousands of years, a human being remembered what it felt like to be an architect of reality. The galaxy was about to learn why Rule 0 had existed and why breaking it had been the worst mistake in recorded history. The transformation of Do-hyun began in the ruins of his family's home. As he knelt among the twisted metal and ash, something deep in his genetic code started to unwind. Locks that had been placed there thousands of years ago broke open one by one, releasing abilities that had slept in human DNA since the dawn of civilization. His grief and rage acted like a key, opening doors in his mind that had never existed before. Suddenly he could see the quantum threads that connected all matter in the universe. Every atom, every particle of energy, every thought was part of a vast web that he could touch and reshape. Do-hyun stood up slowly, and the gravity around him bent to his will. Pieces of debris floated upward as space itself responded to his emotions. He reached out with his mind toward the Velari ships that had destroyed his world, and felt their locations as clearly as if they were standing next. To him, "You killed my family," he whispered, and his words carried across the vacuum of space. War Commander Taemin was reviewing battle reports when every screen on his flagship went black. Then words appeared, written in perfect Velari script. "You killed my family. How is this possible?" Taemin demanded. "Our communications are encrypted. No human technology can break our codes." Before anyone could answer, the ship's hull began to change. Metal turned transparent, becoming like glass. The crew stared in terror as they could suddenly see the empty space around them. Then the hull started to dissolve entirely. Taemin and his warriors found themselves floating in hard vacuum, but somehow they could still breathe. The human who had spoken to them stood in the middle of their formation, having crossed impossible distances in an instant. "I want you to watch," Do-hyun said calmly. "I want you to see what happens when you break the oldest rule." Across human space, the awakening spread like wildfire. Every death, every attack on human colonies triggered more transformations. The genetic locks that had kept humanity normal for thousands of years were breaking faster than anyone had imagined possible. On Mars, Minho discovered that his awakening gifts went far beyond enhanced strength. During another Velari attack on his school, he found himself existing in multiple places at the same time. While his body fought aliens in the main courtyard, his consciousness was also defending the younger students in the gymnasium and helping evacuate civilians from the nearby city. "This is impossible," he thought to himself, but then realized he was having that thought in 3 different locations simultaneously. So-young, a cargo pilot running supplies between Earth and the outer colonies, made an even more startling discovery. As Velari interceptors attacked her transport ship, she felt her consciousness merge with the vessel itself. The ship became an extension of her body, responding to her thoughts faster than any computer could process commands. But it was more than that. She found she could manipulate the fundamental forces that held matter together. When enemy energy, beam struck her ship, she simply changed their frequency, turning destructive weapons into harmless light shows. "Control, this is Transport 7, she radioed to Mars Traffic Control. "Hostile contact has been resolved." "How, 7? "Our sensors show you're unarmed." So-young looked at her hands, which were now glowing with soft blue light. "I'm not sure I can explain it, Control." Dr. Nari worked around the clock to understand what was happening to her species. Her laboratory on Luna Base had become the center of human scientific research as data poured in from around the solar system. What she was learning changed everything. Humans thought they knew about themselves. "The genetic modifications aren't random," she explained to a team of researchers via secure communication. "They're following predetermined patterns. It's as if our DNA contains blueprints for abilities that were always meant to be unlocked." She pulled up a holographic display showing human genetic structure. "Look at this. We have massive sections of supposedly junk DNA that aren't junk at all. They're dormant programs, waiting for the right activation signals." "What kind of programs?" asked Dr. Hyuk from the research station on Europa. "Programs for manipulating quantum fields, for existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, for interfacing directly with technology, for—" Nari paused, hardly believing her own words. "For reshaping reality itself." She had found something else in the deep archives beneath Earth's major cities. Ancient data cores that contained historical records going back millions of years. The story they told was both wonderful and terrifying. Humans weren't just another species that had evolved on Earth. They were the descendants of the architects, the cosmic beings who had once ruled the galaxy, with power beyond imagination. The architects had been so advanced they could create stars, design entire solar systems, and seed life throughout the universe. But their power had corrupted them. They had become cold and distant, treating other forms of life as experiments rather than as beings worthy of respect. The galaxy had suffered under their rule until the architects themselves realized what they had become. In an act of unprecedented sacrifice, they had chosen to give up their cosmic abilities and live as mortals. They had locked away their powers and scattered themselves across the galaxy, hoping that their descendants would learn wisdom before inheriting their full potential. Earth was their sanctuary world, where the architects had hidden themselves in biological form. Humans were their children, carrying the genetic legacy of cosmic gods but living as ordinary mortals. The locks on their abilities would only break if humanity faced extinction, ensuring that their descendants would understand the value of life before gaining the power to reshape it. Captain J felt the changes happening to himself as he watched the transformation of human space from his monitoring station. His awareness was expanding beyond his physical body, reaching out to touch the minds of humans throughout the solar system. He could feel their fear, their wonder, and their growing power. But he was also losing something: the simple human concerns that had once motivated him. Hunger, fatigue, the need for companionship were fading away. He was becoming something larger, something that thought in terms of cosmic time and galactic consequences. "Sir," Lieutenant Bach called out, his voice filled with awe. "The quantum signatures from Earth are off the charts. It's like the entire planet is becoming a single massive brain." Jay nodded, but part of him was already aware of that fact. He could feel the awakening consciousness of his homeworld, as billions of humans began to connect through quantum links that transcended normal space and time. "And sir, we're detecting similar awakening patterns on every human colony. Even the smallest outposts are showing signs of transformation." The Velari Empire was beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. Admiral Rowe, who had voted to end Rule Zero, received reports that painted a picture of impossible human capabilities. His fleets were being destroyed not by superior technology, but by beings who seemed to exist outside the normal laws of physics. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked his aide. 237, sir. But the humans aren't using weapons in any sense we understand. They're simply editing our vessels out of existence." Rose studied the tactical displays, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. Human beings were appearing inside Velari ships, passing through solid matter, as if it weren't there. They weren't killing the crews. They were changing them, rewriting their molecular structure to make them harmless. "Recall all forces," Rowe ordered. "Full retreat to home system." "Sir, what about our territorial claims in human space?" Rowe looked at the reports again. 300 humans had been killed in the first attack. In response, humanity was transforming into something that could reshape reality itself. The cost-benefit analysis was simple. "Forget the territorial claims," he said quietly. "We need to start figuring out how to apologize." On the archive world, Elder Yoon finally found the complete records of the Architect War. The documents had been hidden in the deepest vaults, sealed away because they were too dangerous for most species to know about. The architects hadn't disappeared gradually. They had fought a civil war against their own corrupted leaders, a conflict that had nearly torn the galaxy apart. Entire star systems had been destroyed as cosmic beings battled each other with powers that made physics itself their weapon. The war had ended when the younger architects chose to sacrifice their abilities rather than risk becoming like their predecessors. They had created Rule Zero as their final gift to the galaxy, protection for their sleeping descendants and a warning to anyone who might threaten them. But Yoon also found something else in the records. A prophecy left by the last of the architects before they entered their self-imposed exile. "When the protection ends and our children wake, they will face the same choice we faced. They can become gods and lose their humanity, or they can find a third path that we could not see. The galaxy's future depends on their wisdom being greater than our power." As she read these words, Yoon felt the quantum ripples reaching even the archive world. The awakening humans were becoming aware of everything in the galaxy simultaneously. Soon, they would have to choose what kind of beings they wanted to become. The old rule was broken. Humanity was no longer protected by ancient law, But perhaps Yoon thought they no longer needed protection from anyone except themselves. The Galactic Council met in emergency session as reports poured in from across known space. What had started as a simple military action against primitive humans had become something that threatened the very fabric of reality. Ambassador Kwan, who had led the vote to end Rule 0, stood before the assembly with his purple skin pale with fear. The confident warrior who had dismissed human weakness was gone, replaced by someone who had seen the impossible become real. Honored Council, he began, his voice shaking. The Velari Empire formally requests immediate assistance. The humans have become something beyond our understanding. The holographic displays around the dome showed scenes that defied explanation. Velari warships simply vanishing from existence. Human beings walking through solid matter. Entire planets being moved from one star system to another as easily as someone might move furniture. How many ships have you lost? Asked the hegemony representative. All of them, Kwan admitted. Every vessel we sent into human space has either been destroyed or changed. The humans aren't just fighting us. They're rewriting the laws of physics around our forces. Admiral Rowe of the hegemony fleet spoke up from his section of the dome. My forces are reporting similar events. We sent 3 full battle groups to support Velari operations. None have returned. But we did receive one final transmission. The main screen showed the bridge of a hegemony dreadnought. The massive bear-like admiral could be seen in his command chair, but something was wrong. The metal of the ship was becoming transparent, and the crew was floating in what should have been hard vacuum but somehow still breathing. This is Admiral Thack of the Hegemony 5th Fleet, the recorded figure said. I need to report that our understanding of human capabilities was incomplete. They're not using technology. They're manipulating reality directly. Request immediate recall of all forces before. The transmission cut off as the ship simply faded from existence, erased from space as if it had never been built. The human designated as Do-hyun appeared on my flagship personally, Admiral Rowe continued. He didn't threaten us. He simply explained that we had broken something that should never be broken, and that we needed to understand the consequences. But the most terrifying reports came from the Velari homeworld itself. War Commander Taemin had managed to escape, the destruction of his fleet and return home with news that sent shockwaves through the Empire. Do-hyun had followed him. The transformed human hadn't arrived in a ship or through any kind of technology. He had simply stepped out of empty space onto Velthar Prime, his presence bending reality around him like a stone thrown into calm water. Citizens of the Velari Empire, Do-hyun had announced, his voice reaching every corner of the planet simultaneously. You killed my family. You broke a law that existed for your protection. Now you will learn why that law was necessary. What happened next would be recorded in galactic history as the Day of Understanding. Do-hyun didn't destroy Velthar Prime. Instead, he did something far more profound. He showed them the truth. Every Velari on the planet suddenly experienced what it felt like to be human. They felt the love Do-hyun had for his wife and daughter. They experienced the simple joy of a family dinner, the warmth of holding a child, the quiet contentment of building something together rather than conquering. And then they felt what it was like to lose everything. They experienced the moment when the bombardment struck, the terror of those final seconds, the absolute grief of a father who could do nothing to save his family. For 3 days, the entire Velari population lived with human emotions, human values, and human understanding. When the experience ended, their civilization was transformed. The proud warrior culture that had conquered dozens of worlds wept for the lives they had taken and begged for forgiveness they didn't deserve. But Do-hyun wasn't finished. On the 4th day, he began to edit Velthar Prime itself. Not to destroy it, but to improve it. Deserts became gardens, polluted oceans became crystal clear. The planet's harsh red sun was replaced with a gentle yellow star that warmed rather than burned. This is what my people could have given you, Do-hyun explained to the watching universe. If you had asked instead of attacking, if you had chosen cooperation instead of conquest. But you preferred to take by force, so now you will receive by force. Similar transformations were happening throughout human space. But not all of them were as gentle as Do-hyun's treatment of the Velari. The humans were changing, and not all of them were holding on to their humanity as strongly as others. Minho, the young man from Mars, found himself struggling with his expanding consciousness. He could now exist in dozens of places simultaneously, experiencing the thoughts and feelings of humans across the galaxy. But the weight of so much awareness was crushing his individual identity. "I can feel everyone," he told So-young during one of their quantum communications. "Every human who's awakening, every alien who's afraid, every planet where life is struggling to survive. It's too much. I'm losing myself in all of it." So-young, who had learned to merge her consciousness with machines and energy itself, understood his struggle. "We have to find a way to stay human while using these abilities. If we lose ourselves completely, we'll become just like the old ones who caused all this trouble in the first place." But staying human was becoming harder every day. Each time they used their cosmic abilities, it became easier to think in terms of galaxies rather than individuals, of geological time rather than human lifespans. Dr. Nari worked desperately to find a solution from her laboratory on Luna Base. Her research had revealed the full history of the architects and their ultimate fate. The ancient beings hadn't just given up their power, they had scattered themselves across space and time to avoid the temptation of using it again. "The problem is built into the abilities themselves," she explained to a gathering of awakened humans. "Cosmic power naturally leads to cosmic perspective. The more we can do, the less we care about individual lives. It's like a drug that changes how we think." She had found references to something called the Covenant Protocol in the deepest architect archives. It was described as a way to use cosmic abilities while maintaining mortal perspective, but the details were incomplete. "We need to figure this out fast," Nari warned, "because if we don't find a balance, we'll either lose our humanity completely or we'll have to lock our abilities away again. And next time, there might not be a way to unlock them." Captain J felt the truth of her words in his expanding consciousness. He could now perceive the quantum threads that connected every living thing in the galaxy, could feel the thoughts and emotions of beings on thousands of worlds, but his own individual identity was becoming harder to maintain. He stood on the observation deck of Terra Watch looking out at the stars, and realized he could no longer remember what it felt like to be hungry or tired. Simple human needs seemed distant and unimportant compared to the cosmic responsibilities he now carried. "Am I still human?" he asked himself, but he wasn't sure he cared about the answer anymore. Elder Yoon reached the archive world just as the quantum wave of human awakening swept across the galaxy. Even in the protected vaults deep beneath the planet's surface, she could feel the power of the transforming humans. But she also found something else in the archives, a message left by the architect known as the Last Guardian, recorded just before the ancient beings had given up their power forever. "To our children who will wake when the protection ends," the message began. "We leave you this warning and this hope. Power corrupts not because it is evil, but because it is limitless. The temptation to solve every problem, to fix every injustice, to reshape reality to match your vision of perfection, will be overwhelming." The holographic figure of the Last Guardian looked directly at Yoon as if speaking across millions of years. "But remember this. The greatest power is knowing when not to use power. The strongest choice is the choice to remain vulnerable. And the highest wisdom is understanding that some problems can only be solved by those who still remember what it means to suffer." Yoon realized that the message wasn't just a warning, it was a key. The Covenant Protocol wasn't about technology or genetic modifications. It was about choosing to maintain human limitations even when cosmic abilities made those limitations unnecessary. As reports continued to pour in about humans reshaping reality across the galaxy, Yoon knew that her people faced the same choice the architects had faced long ago. They could become gods and lose their souls, or they could find a third path that combined cosmic power with human wisdom. The galaxy watched and waited to see which choice they would make. The transformation reached its peak when every awakened human in the galaxy felt a single, overwhelming moment of connection. For an instant that lasted forever, They shared one consciousness, one perspective, one cosmic awareness that spanned the entire universe. In that moment, they understood everything. They saw the rise and fall of the architects, felt the weight of cosmic responsibility, and experienced the terrible loneliness of beings who had grown beyond the need for individual connection. They felt the temptation to reshape the galaxy, according to their will, to eliminate suffering by controlling every aspect of existence. And in that same moment, they felt something else. They felt Do-hyun's love for his family, Min-ho's wonder at simple human friendship, So-young's joy in flying among the stars, and Dr. Nari's curiosity about the universe's mysteries. They felt what it meant to be small, finite, and beautifully mortal. The choice became clear. Do-hyun, existing now as pure consciousness networked across quantum dimensions, was the first to step back from the edge of godhood. Standing in the transformed landscape of Velthar Prime, surrounded by the aliens who had killed his family, he made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "I could erase you from existence," he told War Commander Taemin, who knelt before him in terror. "I could make it so your species never evolved. I could rewrite history so that my family never died. But that would make me the same kind of monster that you were." Instead of destruction, Do-hyun offered something unprecedented. "I give you a choice. Live under human protection and learn to value life as we do, or face the consequences of your actions. But the choice must be yours. Free will is too precious to take away, even from those who misuse it." The Veltari Empire, having experienced human emotions and values during Do-hyun's demonstration, chose submission and protection. But more importantly, they chose to change their entire culture from one of conquest to one of cooperation. Isol, the quiet librarian who had become a coordinator of global human defense, proposed the next crucial step. Despite her transformation into something that could manipulate quantum fields with thought alone, she had never lost her connection to human emotion and empathy. "We can't rule the galaxy," she said during a quantum communication that connected all awakened humans simultaneously. "If we try to fix every problem and control every outcome, we'll become exactly what the architects became: cold, distant beings who forget that individual suffering matters." Her proposal was radical. Instead of using their power to dominate, humans would use it to elevate. They would guide other species toward their own evolution, helping them develop the wisdom to solve their own problems rather than imposing solutions from above. Min-ho and So-young worked together to develop the practical application of this philosophy. They discovered that the cosmic abilities they had gained could be channeled in a new way, not to replace mortal experience, but to enhance it. "We can exist as both cosmic beings and humans," Min-ho explained to the gathering of awakened individuals. "But it requires constant choice. Every time we use our abilities, we have to consciously choose to remain connected to mortal perspective." So-young had found a way to shift between cosmic consciousness and human awareness at will. "It's like learning to use different parts of your brain for different tasks. When I need to move a starship across the galaxy instantly, I access my architect abilities. But when I want to enjoy a sunset or share a meal with friends, I focus on my human consciousness." This became the foundation of what Dr. Nari called the Covenant Protocol. It wasn't a technology or a genetic modification, but a philosophy backed by practical techniques for maintaining humanity while wielding cosmic power. "The key," Nari explained, "is voluntary limitation. We choose to remain vulnerable to ordinary human needs, hunger, fatigue, emotional pain, even though our abilities could eliminate these experiences. We choose to value individual relationships even though we can perceive the thoughts and feelings of billions of beings simultaneously." Captain J became the first to formally accept the role of Covenant Guardian. His expanded consciousness could monitor threats across the galaxy, but he deliberately maintained his connection to simple human pleasures: the taste of coffee, the satisfaction of a job well done, the comfort of friendship. "I can feel every major conflict in the galaxy," he reported during one of his regular briefings, "but I choose to experience them through human empathy rather than cosmic detachment." When the Rigel colonies were threatened by solar flares last week, I didn't just move their planet to safety. I felt every colonist's fear and relief as if they were my own family. The Covenant protocol was tested when Admiral Rowe of the Hegemony Fleet came to Earth in person to formally apologize for his role in ending Rule Zero. The massive bear-like alien prostrated himself before the human leadership, expecting death or transformation as punishment. Instead, he found forgiveness coupled with responsibility. "You made a mistake," Jay told him. "A mistake that cost human lives and nearly triggered a cosmic war. But mistakes can become learning opportunities if you let them." Rather than punishment, Rowe was offered a role in the new galactic order. The Hegemony Fleet would become partners in the Covenant system, helping to protect smaller species from the kind of aggression that had once characterized galactic politics. "You understand war," Do-hyun explained to the Admiral. "Now learn peace. Help us build a galaxy where strength is used to protect rather than to conquer." Elder Yoon arrived on Earth carrying the complete records of the architect civilization. She had expected to find humanity either consumed by power or destroyed by it. Instead, she found something that amazed her: beings who had chosen to remain, wonderfully, beautifully human despite gaining the abilities of gods. "This is what the architects could never achieve," she told the human leadership. "They saw power and mortality as opposites. You found a way to be both cosmic and human, simultaneously." Working with Yoon's historical knowledge, the humans drafted a new galactic constitution. The updated Rule Zero reflected their hard-won wisdom. Harm to any sentient species invokes human intervention, but humanity's power must be tempered by wisdom, compassion, and respect for free will. The new system wasn't perfect. Some species initially resented human oversight, seeing it as just another form of domination. But the humans proved their commitment to their principles by helping these species develop their own cosmic abilities rather than keeping them dependent. The breakthrough came when the Andromedans, a proud warrior race similar to the old Velari, requested human assistance in evolving beyond their violent nature. Instead of forcing change upon them, the humans guided them through their own transformation, helping them discover that true strength came from protecting life rather than destroying it. The galaxy settled into a new age of cooperative evolution. Humans served as guardians and guides, but each species retained the right to choose its own path. The Covenant Guardians intervened only to prevent extinction-level threats or to offer assistance when requested. Do-hyun made his most difficult choice at the end of the transformation period. Using his cosmic abilities one final time, he reached across space and time to restore his wife Mireille and daughter Gina, not as they had been, but as they could become. "I won't force you to accept this new existence," he told them as they materialized beside him on the transformed Velthar Prime. "You can choose to remain human, to become cosmic beings like me, or to find your own balance between the two. The choice must be yours." Mireille and Gina chose to explore the middle path, maintaining their humanity while developing abilities that would let them work alongside Do-hyun in building the new galaxy. Their family was reunited, but it was a reunion based on choice and growth, rather than on simply undoing the past. As the story reached its conclusion, humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had gained cosmic power without losing their essential nature. They had learned to be guardians without becoming tyrants, teachers without becoming controllers. The oldest rule in the galaxy still stood, but now everyone understood its true meaning. It wasn't about protecting weak humans from strong aliens. It was about recognizing that the greatest strength comes from those who remember what it means to be vulnerable, finite, and beautifully mortal. In the end, humanity had saved the galaxy not by conquering it, but by showing it how to grow. They had proven that power and wisdom could coexist, that cosmic abilities could serve mortal values, and that the greatest victory was knowing when not to use the strength you possessed. The universe was safe in the hands of beings who had chosen to remain human despite having the option to become gods. And perhaps in that choice they had become something even greater than either.